I'm recording.
Got it. And yeah, it's been about, well, a month since the election, and that's given me some time to really absorb the past 2 years of my life. I mean, it's been it's pretty much occupied almost every waking moment of my life for 2 years, right? And I'm definitely not afraid of a challenge. I'm not feeling like broken or downtrodden or anything like that. I am reflecting a lot more on what maybe fundamentally I thought going in, and what I think I experienced during, and what I hope for the future if I'm going to continue down this path. And for me, a fundamental, difference between what I would perceive the NDP and liberal conservative governments is like this really sharp line, Erwin, like this sharp line between conservatives and liberals, right? And the NDP. And I didn't see that as much as I was hoping to maybe see that. And I think that that line's always been really sharp for me. I drew it over and over and over again. But I did feel and I did experience a lot of fear to go there, to be back to the grassroots kind of NDP that you were talking about 40 years ago. So what I would like to see is, I think people are quite ready for socialism. They really are. I think they're ready for socialism. I think they're ready for, social democracy. I think people are looking around. It didn't matter what neighborhood I went to sometimes, like, it was pretty easy to explain the gaps between the rich and the poor, and how we've gotten here. And but I am wrapping my head around a little bit about, I am hoping that we can get back to socialist kind of our socialist roots. And I won't get too into the weeds about maybe where I felt let down, I think would probably be an accurate term. But I have absolutely felt let down a lot. And although I had a lot of support at the same time, I just think that maybe I'm reflecting a little bit on, like, did I go into this thinking that it would be different? Did I go into this thinking that, I don't know, what's a good example? Like ODSP rates, for example, when that came out, Erwin, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a really hard time with that. I had a really hard time, holding my head up high as a candidate. And so I'm cautious and I'm cognizant, and I'm worried of that if I, have criticisms, that it would impact my future as a candidate. That is something. So if anybody's reading anything on my body language or hearing anything in my voice, it's I'm not typically a person who holds back anything. So it's but I know that I would like to run again. I think I'm just wrapping my head around, what that looks like for me. I don't know about you, Erwin, but did you have any experiences like, where I thought, it's almost like you thought something going in and then it ended up being really different?
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess I was a little surprised that the party I knew 40 years ago is the party today. The same, in fact, some of the same players, I guess me too, but they've been consistent. They didn't leave, and they're doing the same thing. So we used to call it, I learned what the center was as a candidate. And I know people who work in the party told me they don't like to be called the center, but we call them the center. And we used to call it the establishment. And the establishment was the Solbergs and Lewises, and whether they were or weren't, that's who we fought against. And well, by and large, and then the other night I saw Janet Solberg at the provincial council meeting, which I could watch on Vimeo. So I thought, that's interesting that things haven't changed. I learned that. But Erika, I'll pick up on what you said. There was a time when somebody in the campaign said, Erwin, you can't do that because you get in trouble. And I think I remember saying to them, it was a party somebody worked in the center. What I asked them what they meant by getting in trouble. Like, what do you mean I'm gonna get in
Mhm.
trouble? What's gonna happen? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, what do you mean trouble? Uh, I think I said, are you gonna tell me I can't run again? Oh, okay, right. But that's fine. But I can't get in trouble. I can just do what I think is right. And I thought that was interesting. And I'll tell you, the issue of trust in the party. So I'm going to say this, and I know it might be public, but everybody knows this. In and it might be the issue of might be all political parties. I don't know, but in caucus, it's not a well-oiled machine. Just the way the different caucus members, they don't
Mhm.
necessarily trust each other, and there's stuff, and all sorts of stuff. And the caucus doesn't trust the center, and the center doesn't trust the caucus, and the
Mhm.
caucus didn't particularly trust the leader's office, and the leader's office didn't trust the caucus, and the leader's office doesn't trust the center, and the center doesn't trust the leader's office. And God help me that the center didn't trust the candidates, and the candidates then didn't trust the center, and then the center doesn't trust the riding associations, and the riding associations don't really trust the center, and it's a stew, a horrible, horrible stew of mistrust. It is not healthy. And some will say that's organizational behavior. And it's true in lots of organizations, in all organizations, there's some of that. But boy, this is a stew. And
Mhm.
everybody,
Yeah.
the thing is, everybody knows it. So I'm not saying anything that the
Mhm.
center, caucus, the leader, the ridings, I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know. And you know what's sad is that mistrust bleeds into how we don't trust the voters and our
Mhm.
and our members, our average members.
Mhm.
So unless that gets solved, and the only way to solve it is to call it out, right? Unless that gets solved, I don't know how we move forward with OY, to be honest. But it's there.
I I don't know. I mean, I don't want to take up too much more time,
Please
but
take up time. It's better than me taking it up.
well, the points, like the three kind of points I want to leave with anybody who's listening. It's fine. Like, I'm hoping that if anybody in the party is listening, they'll take it with some,
So
like, like, listen. Um, but I do think we ran a campaign on fear. And I think that, like, I found a lot of the times, um, it was really fearful. It was a fearful campaign, fearful of going too far, fearful of not, of being too radical, if you will. But the crises in front of us, I know everyone here will agree, are like so huge, right? And fundamentally, like, I don't know about you, but I'm fundamentally changed after knocking on thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of doors, right?
yeah,
So you understand what people are going through, at a very different level. And I just don't think we met that moment for people, and really gave them enough inspiration to do that. And as a candidate, don't get me wrong, you guys, like, probably some of you follow me online. Like, I'm a shit. Like, I am a shit. Like, I always will be. I'm always been the back of the bus. Like, I've always been a shit. And so, do I need guardrails sometimes? Absolutely. Like, do I need someone to be like a sober second thought once in a while? For sure. However, the one thing that makes me me is my spit and fire, right? And that is something that, I just never felt was entirely embraced. I'm going to give you two examples, okay? Do I think that we should be cautious online? 1,000,000%. Okay, 1,000,000. Have I said stupid things? Absolutely, I have. However, I'm going to give you two examples where I was like, huh, am I running for the same party, right? Like, where I felt like, I wonder if we're on the same page here, because I really don't think we are. Um, it was earlier on when inflation was kind of going a little bit, like, getting intense, and I tweeted out something along the lines of, inflation is made up by profiteers, right? For capital. And I got a phone call, and they were like, "You need to take that down." And I'm like, pardon? Out of all the things I've said, that, like, I need to take that down. They're like, yeah, Erika, like, that's a really not a good tweet to put out there. And I'm like, but it's true. And we were unwilling at that point to acknowledge the fact that corporate profiteering was enhancing inflation. And they're like, well, would you, if that was on a billboard, would you be able to defend it? I'm like, fuck yes. Like, please put it on a billboard, because I guarantee you 90% of North Bay would agree with me, right? There was that. And then, what was the second one? There was two where I was like, when it was around the time when vaccines were being like produced, and I tweeted out, we should nationalize it, right? And I got a phone call, hey Erika, you need to take that down. And I'm like, fundamentally, Erwin, like I thought that, forgive me folks, I thought that like we were here to do those things, right? Like nationalizing vaccines should not be a controversial take. Like saying that capitalism is managing and profiteering off, like making up inflation so that they can profit. I don't know. I don't feel like that was a terribly radical move. Like I've said some pretty fucking bad things online, but those two things I got like specific, like pointed, take it down now phone calls, and I was like, okay, like are we on the same page here? Because I don't know if we are. And so then after that, I just really I get it. Like I know they don't want to deal with rogue candidates. They don't want to deal with like chaos or tweets being like snip screened and put off. But at that time, from that point forward, I think that there was a concerted effort, whether or not they realized it or not, is that there's a concerted effort to, trust me, I've been on this earth for 42 years. Like people love to try to keep me quiet, or they do weird ways to try to like hush hush, like, but there was a lot of effort to make sure that I was quiet. There was a lot of effort to make sure that the things that you said you liked about me, Erwin, at the start, like I was told, I don't like your TikToks. We don't like your little monologues on financial accountability, or I don't know if anybody's seen any of those, but I was told like, we don't like those. You need to take them down. And I was like, but political education to me is one of the biggest pieces missing in a lot of our comms, right? Like in a lot of our communication, it's explaining things to people and bringing them closer and allowing them to have that safe space to ask questions and maybe engage in it. Anyway, those are some things that I'm left with. That, and like we had a really challenging, like we were ready. Our team was organized. We had money in the bank. We had like one of the strongest volunteer teams ever. And we were really let down by like we had staff that didn't want to be there, and we knew it, and they told us. Like it was a really challenging, I don't know if they came to us exhausted, good people, but I just think I am figuring out where I sit with the party right now. Like I feel very not let down that I didn't win. I just feel like let down that maybe they didn't know who I was. Like, did you not like know who I was? Like, I don't even know if I'd be vetted now. Like, now that they know me, I don't know. Maybe I'm making that up, but that's just where my head's at. I know I'm kind of blabbering, but when you go back to the why, it does leave you with like, what are we? Like, are we not like at least a social democratic party? Should we not be pushing to, yeah, I know after this they won't vet you. Probably not. Anyway, but it does, it does. Do I like a lot of the people? Absolutely. Right? Do I think they're great? Absolutely. Do I think that there was like it was fear. It felt very fear-based. And for one of the first and few times in my life, I felt I didn't have a lot of, I had lower self-esteem. Like I felt very nervous operating within the system, because I felt like one of these things is not like the other. And that I was going to disappoint, or that my opinion didn't matter. And as a candidate, it was very clear. I was told over and over again, like, Erika, your opinion as a candidate doesn't really matter. You just need to go with the motions and the flow. And then at the end, I wrote a really nice email. I said, here's my feedback about how that kind of went down. I have some feedback for you guys. And they said, sure, we'll give you a call. And they never called me. So it's like, you put so much, Erwin, like you put so much of your own personal and social capital into this. Like 2 years of my life, it's fine. I know that them's the breaks. I know that this is the way it goes, you guys. Like I know, like I get it. Like but like all of my friends and family like dumped money into this campaign, like all of my time, all of my effort. And then just to be like discarded at the end is a really icky feeling. It's a really icky feeling. Like it does feel like a one night stand.
Oh, oh
It
God.
just it's
Not even good sex.
Okay, you.
that's it. I'll leave it there.
I'm not
I
going
probably
there. I'm not
there's a
going.
lot to talk about. I even, you guys keep in mind that I even tempered this down. I even only gave you maybe 25% of what's actually going on in here. But so be it. Like I hope you guys, like I would love to run again. I think I'm a good candidate. People like me in Nipissing. I think that right at the end, like we were getting dozens and dozens of volunteers. We've got what it takes. I just think the party needs to kind of get together. And I'll leave it at that. I'm probably shared too much, but again, I'll leave it. If anybody has any questions, let me know.
So I just thank you, Erica. I want to say something that picks up on what you said. That was a second thing I learned, and then see if anybody has comments to make. And if you do, raise your hand. I also thought that if there's people that might, like some like me, are new coming back to the party or new to the party, and we're using terms that, if there's terms that you don't know what it means, just put it in the chat. Say, what does that mean? Somebody in this room, there's really some bright people in this room because I know the names, they'll know the answer. Even if, because I wouldn't be able to answer all those questions, but use the chat and don't, it's a brave space too, the chat. So feel free to ask questions of each other if there's things you don't know. But the thing I wanted to pick up on was the idea. So I thought coming in, what I didn't realize, because I have an ego the size of a planet and I act like I'm humble, which not true. My wife would tell you that. And I thought I was being, when I came as a candidate, candidates were like partners with the party. The center was like some place that helped candidates. So candidates would ask the center for help. I need this training. You're going to help me be successful. You call on this and you're my partner. Well, actually, I think I realized that running as a candidate and getting vetted is a job interview, not with the riding, but with the party. So they're your boss. And it's the boss is the party center, is the boss of the candidate. It's not a partnership. And in fact, it goes further and it goes to electoral politics. And I wonder what you'll say to this, Eric, or anybody else. The candidates, it's probably just like capitalism. The candidates become products, just like our policy is a product. It's something we sell. It's not ideas, it's a product. And the candidates are products too, objects. So that's why we get asked to go to all these kinds of meetings and stand beside the leader, and we'll get our picture taken in and you can go away again. And come here, we get told what to say at the end of the campaign. Everything was candidates. In my campaign, we joked about mental dental, mental dental. They wanted us to say mental dental, because that was what the polls apparently told the party center. And I don't distinguish the leader's office from the party center, the party people that we're supposed to do. So go say that. And then it goes further to me. I know how it works because I did it 40 years ago. We used to call it finding the check marks because we didn't have phones and computers and stuff. But you go canvassing and the voters are marks. They're not actually not people. They're marks. So M-A-R-K-S. You go find your marks. Knock on a door. And Erwin, I don't know how many times this. All we need you to do is knock on doors, raise money. Knock on doors, raise money. Knock on doors, raise money. Your local campaign doesn't matter much. It can only change 5% of the vote. This is not me talking about this. It's a central campaign. That's everything. Knock on doors, raise money. Nothing else. Nothing else. That's all we need. If you want to do town halls, well, whatever. Even go to debates, whatever. Knock on doors and get the marks. And everything was commodified from the policy to the candidates to the voters. There's process for everything. And in this case, in a funny sort of way, the capitalists were the party center because they controlled everything. They're running the company, the corporation. And I thought, okay, that's probably true. That's how it works. But if we're a whatever different kind of party, socialist party, if we use that term, I don't think it ever was used once in the election, except for a few like Erika. But if we're a different kind of, we can't operate that way. That's not how we would run elections.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
there's no trust in that.
Think about how I think I asked 3 times. So you guys, if anybody needs to know, like my background, I used to be a wilderness guide for years. So at the end, or when you're child and youth care, like the end of a day, and especially a challenging day, you debrief.
Yeah.
You sit together in a circle and you chat about the day, whether it's good, roses and thorns, whatever you want to call it, right? And I think I asked like 3 times. I'm like, okay, when's the candidate debrief? I'm like, you're going to get a lot of resentful people if there's no candidate debrief. Hey guys, is there going to be a candidate debrief? They're like, oh, here's some paperwork that you can do with. And I'm like, no. Like you had a lineup of the stellar people that you could build off of for the next round, right? That you could like move quickly. And then, but there was nothing. Like Erwin, like your child development, even like that's like you don't go through these big events and just like not talk to anybody. And that's when your comment about being like a tool, right? Like being like a product, part of a product. If you're selling a product, like I think maybe I was naive to that. I don't know, but
Me too.
But that's where it really rings true. Where it's like, wow, you at the end of all this, like have no interest in hearing about this experience or what we could do better. Or like, sure, there's going to be put some stuff on paper, but like Erwin, like we should have all come down to Toronto and had a day together, really, right?
Yes. And I do. So when I see Yemen, your hand is up, and I'm going to get to you in a sec. When I think about the party I would like to see is one where people are working, where the caucus is a partner with the candidates, who's a partner with the center, who's a partner with the riding associations, who's a partner with the caucus. It works as a partnership, all working in common cause because they know what they're trying to achieve. And it's not to get elected. They're trying to achieve a reason to be elected. And that's the party I'd like to see. And we're nowhere close to that. And you asked me, and I'm going to ask Yamin this question because she has her hand up too. Erika, you asked me before we came on, do people realize there's a problem? Like me and you think there's a problem. I'm guessing lots of people here, because you might not be here if you didn't think there was a problem, but do people at the center realize there's a problem? Do the caucus members all realize there's a problem? I can't tell. It's not safe. The party is not a brave space for them to say, yep, there's a problem if they thought there was. It's not, even for them, it's not brave. They have to hold on to it, pretend everything is fine, manage your people, manage. There's not a brave space in the party for them to say it. So I don't actually know if they think there's a problem or not. I can't tell when they're managing me, talking to me, or telling me what they really believe. I don't know. So can I ask Yamin, because you've had your hand up for a long time, what did you want to say? And I don't know if I am saying your name right.
Hey, Erwin. You don't worry about the pronunciation. It's perfectly fine. My name's Yamin. I'm an executive on the Spadina Fort York Riding Association. And my question was for you, because I've only been with the party for a year and a half. or slightly more than that. My question for you is, and anyone can feel free to answer this question as well, but what was the culture like before Andrea got in? Was the culture different? Was the center different? Because Balagus, Lucy, all these guys were not there back then. So what was the culture like before Andrea became leader? That's my question.
There's probably, I'll say what I think, because I was involved way before Andrea. I was involved, who was the leader? Wasn't Michael Cassidy a leader for a while? And then even back when Stephen Lewis. So there's always been a tension in the party between the left of the party and the more center of the party, and there's been a battle over. We used to fight about, seriously, at convention, I was on the nationalization of industry should be the tool in reforming the party, and the establishment wanted it should be a tool for reforming the economy. And so we had the Z tool, A tool debate, and it would blow up and things would go crazy, and the Z tool people would always lose and the A tool people would always win, the establishment win, and we'd go on our merry way. But I wasn't involved at the level I am now as a candidate, or had the chance to talk to lots of caucus members or people at the center or any of that. So I don't know. I would guess that it's all a shade of gray, that this would be my estimation, and it's not about Andrea, because I always have said it's not, the problems of the party are not about people, individual personalities. But if you have somebody who's a leader of any organization for 12 years, you're bound to have a lot of crappy water under the bridge. It just goes with that, goes with the territory. And depending on that leader for that long a time, it's really difficult not to carry a lot of baggage and do a lot of things that were not good in terms of building trust and relationship and building a culture. And so it's not surprising to me after 12 years of one person that it's in a mess, but it is, if people think it's just changing the leader is going to change the mess, because I don't think that's true. But the other people have an answer to that, to Yaman's question, that have been around the party longer than Andrea?
Yeah, basically just
Who's that?
treating.
Oh, hi, Jay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
Well, I'm looking to ask a question after people have answered Yaman's.
Okay, wait. Who was answering that question? Just
Oh no, Erwin, it was me. Sorry.
Oh, it was you, Yaman. Okay.
I do apologize, but I feel like my question was not answered to the extent that I was hoping for. I was really asking about the culture, and by culture I mean empowering riding associations. So was that culture not there before Andrea? Because before Andrea, we didn't have these people. We didn't have Balagus. We didn't have Watson. We didn't have these people. So back then, was it the same culture that we're seeing now? That's basically my question. Empowering riding associations. And
I would say probably, but I don't know. So I'd ask if there's people who were around before.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Is there anybody who has a thought on that? You do, Marcia?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I would say Stephen Lewis was a charismatic socialist, social justice. He was very clear. And then I remember Bob Ray was also passionate, and then got himself scared shitless when he was actually elected into government. So, I mean, we had an NDP government at that point, which, I mean, he didn't last very long, but I think he got more scared about winning than the NDP. The NDP was what I would call a prophetic party. And Andrea is not a prophet. She's just not. period.
Yeah. So around any riding association I was involved in 40 years ago, and you reminded me it was when Bob Ray was the leader too. It really wasn't any different. There wasn't as much, to me, I couldn't see as much mistrust as I see now, and as much stuff to unpack. And that in part could also be because, I'm just throwing this out there, back in the day, there was no such thing as identity politics. Like, there was no anti-racism, anti-oppression. There was no language for, not that white people like me carried, that about anti-oppression. Those words, nobody would know what they meant. 30 years people lived it, of course, but didn't know what it meant. So there was no conversation about equity in that way. And so it was very different, but the riding association was no more in control of itself and a partner in building the party than it is now. That's my experience. And you could ask, I don't know if you know, in a way, I wish he was here, Barry Weisletter, who was one of the leaders of the Left Caucus back then. Or I saw Harry Capito was in a meeting too. Those guys were involved then, and I don't think they would say much has changed about how the party operates from when they were there. They might not have liked Andrea's ways, or Lucy's ways, or Michael Balagas, but they're just a cast of characters, and it's the structure and culture of the party that hasn't really changed. That's my opinion. Jay, what were you gonna say?
I wanted to make sure that everyone who wanted to answer Yaman's question had the time to answer before I asked my next question.
Okay, I'll wait. I'm just looking for people if they want to raise their hand.
I'll just one more thing before we move on. You know what we're sitting with as a riding association, Yaman, is with all these big movements, like all these crises and stuff like that, like to me, there's a huge opportunity to like for what we're looking at here in Nipissing, and I don't know, we'll see if we get in trouble, but I don't think we will, is start rallies and starting kind of rally, because I wanted to do a rally on housing and it was kind of squashed early on because it was like, oh, you might bother, I don't know if it's a good idea. Like, I wanted to raise hell, like many other places, there was tent cities and stuff, right? Anyway, but wouldn't that be great if we could just fully become rally big time in our communities and be the local experts and that's my vision of a riding association. And I agree, I didn't really have an opportunity to experience, I only watched from the sidelines some of the issues at riding associations, but to me, my vision for the future of the NDP is that riding associations actually have the capital, if you will, to do really good things, because there's an opportunity.
Yeah, man, what did you think before we see if there's Jay has a point or a question? What do you think? What's your sense? And maybe you weren't there back decades
ago. No, for sure. I mean, I was not there. I mean, I'm, relatively speaking, a new immigrant to Canada. I got my passport in 2014. And, I started getting involved in politics just, close to 2 years ago. So unfortunately, I can't do a before and after contrast. I only know what the current culture is. And I'll be very honest, my experience, thankfully, has actually been very positive. Because, I've developed a friendship with my candidate, with my MPP, who's an incumbent, because we're also neighbors. So my overall experience has been very positive. But having said that, I work in the corporate sector, and also because I'm a volunteer within the party, I can see a lot of structural flaws. There are very basic mistakes that would never happen in a corporation. For example, I believe only 7 out of 124 riding associations have functioning websites. So there are certain basic things that need to be fixed, and then also the the lack of democracy is unacceptable because I'm a history buff. I've read the history of this country. I grew up in a third world country. I've seen what happens when unions don't exist. Basically, laborers get tortured, maimed, and killed on a daily basis. When you don't have unions, you have workers with missing limbs. That's what you have. I'm originally from Bangladesh. So what I'm hearing, the lack of democracy is completely unacceptable.
When you say the lack of democracy, can you give us an example of what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, provincial council was an example, right? Because
last night?
Yeah, because the agenda was not sent beforehand. People were not able to decide on the agenda, and then also the lack of democracy within the caucus. I have it from firsthand information that when a MPP wanted to pass a particular piece of legislation, Andrea would have to approve it personally first. Only then would caucus get to vote on it on an internal in an internal vote. So that's not democracy. Democracy is when, let's say, if I'm an MPP and I want to bring forward a piece of legislation, then I should be able to vote on it with my colleagues. I shouldn't have to wait for Andrea to say yes or no. I mean, she's not a queen. We did not accept the rule of monarchs, and I'm in this party because I don't accept the rule of oligarchs either. So yeah, that's my bit. And I think millennials and Gen Z being the majority voting bloc, I think we can change this culture once and for all with the help of people like Jay and other people that I know on here.
Thanks, Yaman.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my question.
Okay, Jay.
That was an awesome question, Yaman. And an awesome closing statement. I want to ask, because we know for the most part, you have touched on it, the punishment for speaking out as a candidate, as a member, no matter where you are speaking out, you lose favor, you get boxed out, you get punished. It's not a paranoia, it's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
So even talking now, it's clear there's fear in some candidates who wish to run again, or people who wish to either advance in the party, become staff, whatever it is. There is that fear of repercussion for speaking out. So when you have issues like our party talking for years about the forced poverty on the disabled community, and then our policy is you can still suffer, but 20% less. As candidates, I know there was candidate meetings and there was a lot of conversation in that, but in a public space, they're not going to remove 30, 40 candidates during an election. So that is an opportunity to say, screw the hyperpartisan crap, screw the kinder, nicer focus on Andrea because our candidates aren't worth focusing on campaign. Let's not drop ping pong balls. Let's drop condemnation and say, this is horrible. It needs to be better. We stand for better than this. Is it a different situation being a candidate during an election to turn to other candidates and say, we are activists, we are union members, why don't we organize and say enough is enough? Or why not take the ultimate platform during the ultimate focus on political members and have that as an opportunity to use your platform as your platform instead of it being appropriated by the party? Because I know there is the fears, there is the trade-off of you don't necessarily have to just pair it central, but if you go off policy, you can get removed as a candidate, but they're not going to remove half of their candidates or a quarter of the candidates. So is there ever any kind of thought to, I don't care because other people are going to speak out, or is the fear as a candidate so deep that they're going to punish you in some way or it hurts your future that you were more willing to not speak to issues that a lot of people since have spoken out about? A lot of candidates have spoken out about the ODSP position because it deserves to be condemned. So was there any kind of moment where that was an active thought, like, screw it, I'm just going to speak my truth? And Laura May's here, so you can
Yeah, I
answer
see
that
Laura
if you
May.
heard it.
Hi, Laura May. I'm gonna just let Erica. Do you want to say anything to that? I don't want to put you on a spot.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. I'm more reflecting on it because again, like being quiet isn't my normal position, like not speaking out against things. We did have meetings and it was brought up by multiple candidates about our discomfort about the ODSP position, the original one, Erwin, if you were there for, remember we all kind of like one by one, like said we didn't like it.
Yeah.
And then, but in terms of like Jay, in terms of like using that power in a different way, no, I don't, it would have been a better idea for sure. I think we were trying to kind of get at it through the channels, if you will, at the start. And then, you know, then we were told the response to give was this, you're supposed to say it in this framing, and it still didn't sit well with anyone. And then like 2 days later, it flipped.
There's,
But
you
you're
know,
right.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
No, I
no,
was just saying, go ahead, Erwin, you go ahead. I don't have much else to add.
we'll finish what you were saying. That was rude.
No, it's hard to, no, I'm giving some thought, like I'm more just reflective. So I don't have much else to add.
I just wanted to add that two things. One, that fear that Erica spoke about, that I spoke about at the beginning, that I wasn't really, well, I wasn't fearful at all about getting in trouble because I couldn't, as I explained before. There was no trouble I could get into. I did fear upsetting the apple cart. Like I did fear about doing something at the beginning of a campaign, middle of a campaign, that would cause Laura May not to win. And so I was hesitant to cause trouble, that I'm going to use that word because the party would have, to cause trouble that way, because I didn't want to upset the apple cart. So I was sensitive about that. I wanted to say that the fear that Erica talked about is in so many levels, because there were party staff that were fearful, right? Some people know, some don't know, but it's not a surprise. There's a debate among the staff and their bosses about how much they get paid, how they get paid, how many hours they work during a campaign, what the compensation's like. You know, we'll probably go to the labor board in the future with our own unionized staff. So that's taking place. And there's a sense that some staff are feeling very uncomfortable too about rocking the boat because they'll lose their job, or they're on most of the staff we were working with are contract staff. So their contract's over, they want a new contract, they want to stay involved in this party, they can't rock the boat. So I'll give you examples. There's campaign candidates who would like to see the campaign manager's manual. Well, campaign managers weren't allowed to share their manual with the candidates. I still haven't seen it. I hope I see it soon, because I'm heard there's stuff that the party is telling campaign managers about how to manage candidates that maybe candidates wouldn't think is the partnership I was talking about. And then there's fear in the caucus, right? That and it wasn't just Andrea, and it's part politics, but maybe I can't speak Laura May, I don't want to put her on a spot to speak about what it was like, but I know that you can get blocked in caucus, right? It's not just you go along or you don't get your question in question period. You don't get to put your private, there's fear at all levels. There's fear, you know, Jay, there's the left wing of the party, or whatever it is, whatever groups there exist, whether it's a disability group or the Black Caucus or what, fear. Like I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the people who ran the party were afraid of them, right? Fear. So that's why they're trying to control it, because they're afraid, and it's all built on mistrust. I'm not listening. All built on mistrust. And because there's no reason to fear. If we have common project, there's no reason to fear. We're working together. But that's not how it works. And so that idea of fear is rife.
Nothing says solidarity like fear keeping us apart, huh?
Yeah, I know it sounds so. I know it sounds. You're gonna call me the tone police or something again.
No, I
I
was
thought that was a
making
good
fun of the
term. I
reality.
never heard that before, but I don't mean it so Mr. Rogers-y. It's just I can see it. Like, and maybe Yaman would say, yeah, in corporations that work that way with that culture, the departments in the corporation are at war with each other and don't trust each other and fighting, and it's dysfunctional. It's completely dysfunctional.
Actually, Erwin, corporations, they can't function like that.
Right. They do. They're going to go out of business.
So the way corporations function is the way a centrally planned, like a Soviet economy would function.
Uh-oh.
That's how corporations become successful.
Laura May, and I see, Charles, your hand. I just want to thank you for coming, Laura May. I introduced you. You said you were at a rally. Yeah, I'm not going to introduce you again. But it's just like you to make an appearance, to show up and like this and make an appearance. It's like you. So we're talking about all sorts of things, but I started by asking Erika, who you know, wave a magic wand. What would this party be? What would this party be? And you answered anyway. I know you have the feels you said, so say what you were thinking you wanted to say.
Listen, I have lots of feels, and I wanted to, before I answer that, or maybe as I answer that, I just wanted to speak a little bit about the fear. So again, apologies that I'm late. I was at a rally for reproductive health and reproductive rights, which I also couldn't miss, but then I wanted to make sure that I jumped in here. So I'm now literally in a car. Here are some random thoughts in no particular order. The first one, actually somebody put it into the chat. Fear is a tool. The extent of the fear is also indicative of the ways in which the folks in positions of leadership, whether it's in this party or it's elsewhere, are successful at maintaining the control, even if they believe that what they're doing is for a good reason. The reality is, when you're operating from a place of fear, you're not open to making change. You're not open to listening to criticism about the pathway that you're taking. You're not open to hearing what the actual needs are on the ground. You're more concerned with the win. And then there's questions about, well, what is the win? And so for me, personally, if the win doesn't do something to actually help the most vulnerable, then there was no point in doing the work that we had signed up to do. So as Mummy says, I tell you that to tell you this. In a perfect world with a magic wand, having anything that I wanted, I would want to be part of a movement that was literally focused on community, work with community, and being led by community. And I know that there are moments within, just based on my time in office, there are moments when you in a position of leadership have no choice but to make a decision where you can't consult with everybody in beforehand, where you do have to stand up and make a decision on the spot to move things forward. But if you've built a relationship of trust and respect, love and care with community, community will respect the decision that you make in those moments. And so I also find that from this place of fear, we often use the fact that you can't consult with everybody as an excuse to not consult at all. And so that becomes a whole other level of tension that makes it really, really difficult to do the job. And so I do think that it's important for us to have a discussion like the one that we're having now about how deep that fear is, how deep that fear was, and what we want to do now. Because I think the being an eternal optimist, the most important piece of this is that community has said this isn't what we want from the party. We saw it well before the election. I mean, when people are leaving the party en masse because they are not being heard, you can't ignore that. You can't that is like a major sign that something is going wrong in the movement. And so I do think that it's really, really important for us to think about, in this moment, what do we want our leadership to look like? In this moment, how can we rebuild the trust? Because it's not a given that the trust is there just because we're part of a particular political party. Trust has to be rebuilt. And I am just honored to have been invited to participate in this discussion.
Thank you, Laura May. How do you, okay, can I ask you how you think we should, what are steps to rebuilding trust? Can I tell you what, it's one sentence. I said we have to figure out a why, what our why is as a party too, because that having a common project helps center us together.
I totally agree. We have to think about our why, but I don't think that we can get to what our why is until we provide enough spaces for people to actually feel like they've been heard. And sometimes what happens is we set up moments where people say things and the response is defensiveness instead of listening. And I think that that is also something that's not helping us to rebuild that trust. When we're rebuilding that trust as well, I think we have to be rebuilding it, not just, it's like there's levels of rebuilding that trust, right? So as somebody who put their name on the ballot, whether you cross the finish line or not, there were expectations that you had that people would be there for you. And I don't know that every candidate felt that what they were told is what actually happened for them. And so there's trust that needs to be rebuilt there. When you are a party member and you've paid your membership and you go to meetings and you're not feeling like the kinds of issues that you feel are really important to you are being heard, then there's trust that needs to be rebuilt there. When you're part of one of the advocacy groups within the party, and you're having to fight to be heard, to have what it is that you need to be able to actively participate because you are bringing value to the party, because you are literally the people, then there's trust that needs to be built there. And so I do think that before we can get to the bigger why, we literally have to have these kinds of moments, and not just with the like-minded people. I'm not talking about, just yelling and whatever, but just, we need to have moments where people are just able to say all of the stuff that they need to say and they feel heard, and you literally feel your whole spirit go, like you can finally breathe.
Yeah.
And then we can start to rebuild that why. Otherwise, it's going to be sort of like yet again, a why coming from outside that's sort of superimposed on you. And there'll be questions about the authenticity of the why that we're now connecting ourselves to.
Yeah. Makes sense. Anybody have a thought or question for Laura May or Erika around that? Charles, you had your hand up for a long time. Can you say what you wanted to say and respond to Laura May there? Can you fit it in?
Yeah, thanks, Laura May. That was powerful and I think extremely well said. I think you're 10,000% correct. What I put my hand up for was actually just kind of a bit of an add-on to Jay's question. We see that, or I see that one of the mechanisms of control that the central organs of the party use is keeping people disconnected and not letting them talk to each other, whether that's, turning the chat on or off, as the case may be, in a council meeting, or just like not letting people know how to contact staff, contact executive, contact the other council members. And so Jay was asking about, did the candidates consider sort of banding together and rebelling, I guess, basically, against the central party? And my question would be, would that have even been possible? Did you have a way to directly contact the other candidates, or were you also kept siloed and separate like the members are?
Thanks for asking that, Charles, because I was gonna say that, and Laura May and Erika can say this truth. We did start having these candidate meetings every Friday morning. I think it's switched out, but and all the candidates are invited, and maybe 60 to 80 would come. But unlike this meeting, the chat was disabled. So we couldn't talk to each other. And even when we asked, could you enable the chat so we can talk to each other? I remember the person who was organizing the meeting for the party said it was a safety issue because they didn't want the candidates to be harassed, whatever that meant. And I think nobody else seemed to care. I just left it. But then I asked for a list of all the candidates' emails, and I was not permitted that. So they told me to get it from the websites or something. So I cobbled together a list as best I could, but a lot were campaign managers' emails. So in a way, I would say, Charles, there was, whether it's purposeful or not, and I can say it was purposeful, there certainly was structural problems for allowing candidates to even talk to each other. And I'll say this, and Laura May, you don't have to comment, but when I tried to get 5 MPPs to make a statement together, and we were going to write it as candidates in Toronto, they were told they're not allowed.
I just really
Technically not
quickly
allowed
wanted
to
to
do
say
that.
that
Even
I wanted to
MPPs
take
aren't
something
encouraged
back in
to
our
work together.
conversation when I said,
Sorry,
you know,
Joy?
this is why we need people who are connected in their communities to also step up and to have that spotlight. And I feel like it's true, but honestly, all of it's important. Reconnecting, connected, all of it's fucking important. What we're dealing with is just someone who is just not okay. They're just not okay. It's all important. This person's just not okay.
Joy, that was you?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize my thing was on. My apologies.
Yeah, I don't know if you were meaning all of us to hear that, but
No, my apologies.
Oh, no worries. Okay, go back on mute. Whew, I didn't know who I was going to ask you were talking about. Hopefully it wasn't me. Laura May, did you want to say anything to the Charles's question about, and Erika, about candidates getting together? Could we have rebelled if we wanted to? I didn't see a big appetite to do that.
I think it depends on what you mean by rebelling, to be honest. So my team decided to put out our own version of the platform. Like, we literally created our own little infographics and said, this is what we're going to fight for, within which we included the $2,000 immediate increase for OW and ODSP. And part of the reason that we decided to go that route is because I had spent 4 years where part of my job, I didn't know when I was first running, but I realized when I was in the gig, would be to push the party to do better, to respond to the issues in meaningful ways that were being brought to us by community. And so, no, not everybody was happy with that. Yes, people felt, I shouldn't say that I know for sure, but based on some of the feedback that I got once I posted the graphics, it seemed to have made some folks a little uncomfortable that I would go out on my own in that way. However, sometimes you have to say what is right. And sometimes what I found is that the fear of not having a bold position accepted was what was stopping the party from communicating in bold ways. And so sometimes what we would have happen is, they would say, don't talk about X. I would go and talk about X. People would be really happy that we talked about X. And then they would be like, isn't it great that we talk about X? And so during the election, I just sort of jumped to the end of that argument and just put out my stuff. And I explained to everybody that reached out to me that this is what I am fighting for as an individual. So that was one way that that I pushed to do what I could within that system. The other piece of it was that we were broken up in regions which was supposed to help us to sort of stay connected within these regional spaces. But I do think, just based on some of the feedback that I was hearing, that maybe that regional approach was different if within the region you had more folks that had been in office for longer, who had sort of, that fear was part of how they were operating, because that had become norm, right? To like ask permission to do stuff, or ask, not that you shouldn't tell people what you're doing, but ask permission to push a boundary, which you know they're going to say no, and then that would be the excuse to not do stuff, versus new people who were like, I don't know, let's just try doing this because we're trying to respond to community. I'm going to stick a pin in that, say this, and then I'll hand it over to Erika as well. And hi, Erika, how you doing? I remember once upon a time, it was before I was elected, it was when I was in my other job. So I was the director of diversity and equity at Laurier. And I oversaw a bunch of these community, like these student-led groups within my department, one of which was the Rainbow Center. And I had been there for like a week. And one of the students in the Rainbow Center said to me, do we have your permission to mount a protest? To which I looked very puzzled and said, why on God's green earth would you ever ask me for my permission to mount a protest? Like, your job is to protest. My job is to navigate the system so that you can protest more. Like, that's what I thought the arrangement was. So the reason I'm thinking about that is because sometimes within these systems, we become complacent and we forget that we actually are part of a bigger movement. And that some of the ways that we have actively, successfully been able to change things is to push the boundaries. And so as much as we can do to come together and push those boundaries, the better that we will be. We just can't do that if I don't teach out, is how I've often said it. Like, until I was elected, I didn't know what kinds of limitations there were to the kinds of things that I keep and talk about in the chamber. I had no idea. And so I, as an elected official, have to be able to find a forum where I can tell people what might work and what might not, and we can sort of work collaboratively to find more ways to do things. Community asked me to do some stuff that I simply can't do. So what I do locally is I connect them to other groups that might be able to do that, and then I use my position to try and do the other things to support them. But I don't even feel like we have that conversation on a regular as a party, right? Sorry, I just went into all sorts of tangents.
No, you're brilliant. Erika?
Yes. I don't know, at the beginning of all this, I know you weren't here, Laura May, and that's totally fine. But I think what I said really quickly was like, I felt I've had a month now to really reflect on like this. I know there's people already here listen to it, but I did feel like the election was fear-based, right? Like based on fear. So, and that still really has actually a pretty big grip on me in terms of like, do I want to run again? Will they vet me? Because, because I have really constructive criticism that I think that they could use, but I don't know if the constructive criticism would mean that I don't get vetted, right? Right. So I'm hoping that we can find some way forward here, because I feel like it's definitely lost its way. And I know that's going to put a lot of pressure on you, Laura May, to like to solve a lot of it. But I just don't want you to feel like alone in that either, because I'm not ready to give up. That's the thing, is that I'm not ready to give up yet. I'm not, but something's got to give, right?
You said something that I want to ask Laura May now. Laura May, I don't think of you as the person who, I mean, obviously I look to you for wisdom, but you're not alone in this, I don't think. There's other people who, because you asked me this before, Erika, and I'll ask Laura May, do people know there's a problem, or is it just the 40 people here and maybe the other people in New Demo chats and stuff, or do people really know there's problems?
Oh, people know there's problems. Like,
okay.
Yeah, people know that there's a problem. I think that what people don't know is what to do.
Right.
And I think that when we have normalized particular ways of doing things, then it becomes increasingly difficult to be creative about solutions and ways of addressing the kinds of issues. So people are feeling a lot, and they know that they don't have the relationships that they used to have. And there's always stories, like everybody will tell you stories about,
Yeah.
oh, we used to have so many volunteers and now we don't have volunteers. The next sentence that comes out of somebody's mouth after that is very telling. If they say, we used to have a lot of volunteers, now we don't have a lot of volunteers, oh man, why is the public so apathetic? And they start to point fingers, then there's a problem. As opposed to, and this is not coming from politics, this is coming from my background in education. When you have a classroom of students and all the students fail, if a teacher turns around and they're like, my students suck, as opposed to, how did I not
Yeah. I know what she was going to say.
teach them how to pass this, right? And so I think right now we have a bit of a systems problem where the next sentence isn't, how are we going to get this movement built? Like, how are we going to get them? There are little tweaks to things that of course have to happen within platforms. That's a given, right? But the reality is, when you say high level, invest in people, nobody's arguing that. How are we not able to get people excited about that? We're not able to get people excited about that because we don't ask them to participate in the building of the actual solution. We say to them, okay, fine, I'll do all of this and I don't even need to tell you anything. And there's no relationship there, right? We don't even check back in to see if anything that we said made a difference. And so there's something there that's problematic. And so everybody is feeling it. I would feel very confident in saying that everybody is feeling it. Where they're stuck is, what is the solution? And because we haven't been able to be creative about what those solutions can look like, and because we're still thinking about the politics in a traditional space instead of a movement, which you can never give up on. Like, you never give up on a movement. The world is moving. There's always a movement, right? Then I think that the ideas that we come up with to try and address that tension are often flawed, right? They're last minute asks of people that we just expect to do everything that we want, as opposed to respectful engagement with people to find out if they have the time or the energy or the capacity to be able to help, right? It's like, I remember I was saying this to my team, when I finally have a second, because I haven't yet had a second because it's been a little bit wild. But when I finally have a second, the first group of people I want to call are the people that donated $5 to my campaign. Because there's always this idea that you're supposed to call the high-end donors, the ones that donated $1,000 or $2,000, whatever the max donation is, right? But the reality is, somebody who gave me $5 for my campaign was probably struggling and still felt that they saw something that I was doing, that I was reflecting for them what they needed. They are the ones that should receive my thanks. But I don't even think that that's a regular thing that people do, because I've never had anybody say, here's a list of your $5 donors. And yet we'll have like a press release that goes out that says the majority of our donations come small donations, lots of people. So are we thanking them? Because I don't think that I've ever had anybody give me a list of $25 and below. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And so that's the reason why we can't afford to stop. Like, to Erika's point, we can never be ready to give up, but we do have to figure out how do we connect to people, and how do we make sure that what we're doing is actually resonating with them.
So do you have a process in mind for the party inside and outside? Do you have you put your mind to that, or that's what you're doing next week?
First I nap.
Yeah.
Just teasing. First, I make my son eggs because he really has been begging me for nighttime eggs. So I have to go make him eggs. After I make the hard-boiled eggs, then I will put my mind to it. Well, to be honest, some of it is this. Like, some of it is for me at least, because I kind of can only do me right now, is showing up in places and listening to folks and having some real talk and taking that risk. It is risky. I don't know what's going to happen, but I also believe that if you're dedicated to the movement, as opposed to positions of power, that whatever happens next, the universe is going to guide me to the next place for me to do the work that needs to be done and to be able to help in the way that I want to, right?
Yeah.
So showing up is part of it. I do think it's important for us to have some form of a strategy where people feel like they can have real discussions about stuff. And I don't know that we have that yet. I used to, before I was elected, I used to do things like just hold spaces for people, like literally just, we didn't know, there was no plan. We were just going to sit there and we were going to talk about whatever people needed in that time. That's what we were going to do. And I feel like we need to have that too, because again, there's a lot of things that are happening. I'm going to mute myself because he's 7. He's following me around saying eggs, eggs, eggs.
Okay.
You don't need to know that. Okay.
Thank you, Laura May. I'm glad you show up where you do. Jay, I know we're at 8:30, so people put your hand up if you want to speak. Jay?
I wanted to kind of cover something, or not cover something, change the perspective, because we have been focusing on the issues that stem from Central and the way the different bodies operate, like caucus and executive and council. But if you actually look at your riding association, for the most part, there's a lot of these same issues. And think of the entry point for new members and how they're brought into the party. If they're not fostered at that level, at the entry level, then they can be gaslit by these systems. So someone who is operating and has survived or has even gained position or favor within the fear system or within the current system, they want to maintain that system because they have a place in it. A lot of people, and this is where I think the party messed up the most, a lot of people got politically involved for the first time at the start of the pandemic. Zero understanding of politics, zero understanding about a party structure, a riding association, any of it. And most people, including people who have been around for decades, have no real understanding of Robert's rules. So just being able to participate, my riding association got dismantled after a whole bunch of crap with our candidates not being even vetted. They weren't given packages, and then a paper candidate who did campaign. Like, I was doing damage control. But what we have done is we have focused on what I have called the community campaign, where we are more focused on being involved in our riding, in our community, supporting others and helping people. And it's not about the partisanship. It's not about partisan opportunity. We are there as members of the NDP. This is who we are. This is why we're involved. And every single new member who signs up, first chance I get, I reach out to them. What's one thing you would want to do if we were to give you the resources and the funds and helped you do it? And a lot of people, I've been called the NDP guy in my area. They understand that I am who I am. I do what I do. My daughter and I will talk to, she's a natural politician. She'll talk to anyone about anything. I'm the same way. And it's just random interactions with people over and over and over and over. And that is what people think the NDP is. And then I have to have a realistic talk. Like, this is the structure of a riding association. This is council, executive, staff. But I have to give the disclaimer. This is what it currently is. This is the reality. And I will never keep people or try and convince people to stay in what they believe is an abusive or toxic situation. But the people who have just come into the party over the last few years, into politics over the last few years, they don't have any of the decorum driven into them. They don't have respectability politics. They are people who are suffering, they're pissed off, and they want action now. And like Laura May had said, when you come into this party, you almost get stifled, you get boxed in, you get overwhelmed with all of this gatekept information on how to actually take part. If we actually empowered members from the truest grassroots, that's where we have better results. That's how you engage the 57%. Not all of them, obviously, but those people, whatever reasons they had, I guarantee you an NDP member can talk to them about it. So it's this idea of, like, I've made it clear, most people know I have a petition for Lucy Watson to resign. Like, there is a very specific source to a lot of the issues, but we can't just hyper focus on that fear and the repercussions and all of that, because it's a ripple effect that's affecting every aspect of the party. And the most direct way we can impact it is at the riding level. Sorry, I'm politicking when I'm not a politician.
Can I add something to what it was Jay that was talking, right?
Yeah, it was Jay.
Yeah. I just wanted to add something to what Jay said, because it is brilliant and yet often overlooked. We have so much expertise within the party and within the caucus. It is fascinating to me that we look outside of ourselves for some of the solutions that we need. And so it was, as Jay was speaking, I was thinking about the ways in which we say we want to engage with certain groups, or the ways that we want to address certain issues. We actually don't even allow people that do have expertise in certain areas to talk to the rest of the party membership to demonstrate that we are literally interested in doing that work. And I could name a litany of topic areas in which that does not happen, right? So I think it's really important for us, in the midst of everything, as we grow that movement and have those discussions, that we also recognize that expertise. That's how we recruit people, right? Like, we literally go around and recruit people and ask them to put their names on ballots based on all this amazing work that they've done. And then when they get here, either as candidates or as elected officials, we no longer rely on their expertise to do literally the exact same thing that we said they were experts at, and why we asked them to be in these positions. And so any ways in which we can do that, I think we have to do. Yeah, sorry, it's just something in what he said really sparked that for me.
Yeah. And then when you said that, you made me think, there's this fellow, no, I'll say it. I don't think he'll mind, but Rosario Marchese, who used to be an MPP, right? And so I don't know how he decided to befriend our campaign, and I'd meet him for coffee and he'd give me advice and stuff. But one of the things he said in passing was, even the people who were MPPs like him, old timers, right? They know a lot. The party discarded them too. They even said, let us get together as alumni of the party. We'll help. We'll do things. We've got some experience. Nope. And it's so weird. Like, to me, what you said, Laura, I get it. If I was gonna do a facilitation of any kind of, like, even the reason I asked you about the process of bringing the party together, building trust, is because I know you know how to do that. I know you know how to create human processes for people to be heard, to create safe, brave spaces, whatever kind of space you call it. You're way ahead of me, so you know how to do all that. Why wouldn't I ask you? Like, if there's a need in the party, and I'm sure there's other people in the party, whether members or ridings or other MPPs, know that, create a process for us to find a way to come together. So I agree completely with you. And that's why I think it's fear. There's a fear of losing control, a fear of losing your job, a fear of losing something, but the people who are not creating those spaces are afraid to. And
Yep.
they're afraid to be humble and say, you know what, Laura May, like I don't know Lucy from a hole in the ground, but the reason I don't think she needs to get fired is because if she came and said, you know what, Laura May, we're fucked. I don't know what to do. Help me. Like I want to bring people together, figure out a process. You might say there's some things you have to do, Lucy, first, but if people can do that, that's where we need to be. If they and create that process, if they can't play in that process, then they'll leave. They won't be.
So I need to add two things to that. I don't even know what time this thing is done. I'm sorry, folks.
Well,
Now I
we
have
should
things
finish
to
now.
say.
Yeah.
It should be finished now. Okay,
No,
done.
no.
No, I'm just teasing.
You finish.
I'm still talking. I can't stop. Okay, two things. One, I think that we always have to be careful with calls for folks to be fired. I don't care what the topic is, but we always have to be careful with calls for folks to be fired if we don't have a thorough plan about how you're going to actually change the culture. Because the reality is, in the time that people have been at the helm, they've created this normalized way of doing things. And so you get rid of one person and the same bad stuff keeps happening. And so my parallel experience is when we talk about racism in policing, for instance. You can go find yourself like a single racist officer, say that they need to be removed, and then you can then sit back and witness more racism be perpetuated anyway, and then ask yourself why. And it's because the culture of policing hasn't shifted, and an understanding of how racism operates hasn't actually been engaged with. And so I thinking of that as my parallel. I hear what you're saying in terms of needing to have this broader. That's not going to be the fix. It might be required to have certain people gone. That might very well be what is required. But that alone is not going to address the root of what is actually happening. If what we're also saying is that the root is a lack of transparency, a lack of communication, people don't know what's actually happening. There's a disconnect between, policy stuff that we're voting on at convention and what's actually happening at Queen's Park. Those are core issues that one person being told to leave isn't necessarily going to fix. And so I do think that that conversation has to be more thoroughly engaged with. And the other thing I wanted to just say as a concrete example, when the Black Caucus, and I don't think people even know this, but when the Black Caucus was brought together, one of the things that we did was we brought in an expert in areas that Black communities had said were problematic. So we brought in a bunch of people, but one of them was a doctor who was talking about racism in the healthcare system. And we invited any critic whose critic portfolio had anything to do with healthcare, so broader thoughts on what healthcare is. And we had this doctor whose expertise was in equity in healthcare speak to all of the critics. In the process of having that bigger conversation, it was open to everybody, but first we invited the critics that would be most impacted by it, or whose portfolios would be most impacted by it. What I found by the end of the session was that there were more MPPs that were willing to or felt confident enough to engage in discussions about how certain mental health investments were needed to support Black communities, or what happens to folks that have sickle cell in our healthcare system. Mm-hmm. There was like this broader range of MPPs who all of a sudden felt confident enough to have that conversation. And so I'm raising that because those are actual concrete ways that we can change the way that we're doing things at Queen's Park and rely on the expertise within the caucus to be able to do that. But that apparently was an atypical kind of approach to whatever happens. Now, I can't tell you what happened before because I was only first elected in 2018. But the fact that when I asked to do it, it was like, why would you do that kind of thing? And later on, when there was a push from the party side for everybody to engage in anti-racist training of some kind, I I remember advocating for some of us, like myself or Jill Andrew, for instance, Rima Burns McGowan, who do this work in our regular life, to just talk to caucus about ways of doing their work, because we had both the knowledge of the political system and what kinds of skill set they needed and what kinds of barriers there are to the work, and the knowledge, the theoretical knowledge. But we were told that we weren't allowed to do that. And so I do think it's really, really important for us to think about those moments and document what was successful, and then do some of that. The last thing, and this was also something that Jay's comments made me think about, when we are talking about when we're talking about the things that were unsuccessful in the election, if we talk about it as though an umbrella, every single thing was unsuccessful because we didn't get our outcome that we wanted, which was government, then we're missing opportunities yet again to learn from each other, because some ridings actually did well. And so there has to be some discussions with them about, well, how did you get volunteers if other people are saying they couldn't? Or, how did you keep doing this while other people did that? And even from folks that didn't cross the finish line, honestly, there's so many ridings that came really close. So what was it that they needed to make that last push? I think that there's opportunities for us to learn from each other. But again, there's this barrier or fear that happens to have a hard conversation. Like, listen, having a conversation with folks that either put their name on a ballot or were denied having their name be able to be put on a ballot is not going to be an easy conversation. But if the starting point of that conversation is we are all fighting, then it's going to be disastrous. But if the starting point for that conversation is, listen, we value you, and because we value you, we want to hear from you, then all of a sudden you have an opportunity to have a tough conversation, and actually everybody wins and everybody gains, and we figure out what we want to do with this movement, right? So those are all my thoughts, and I will mute myself.
Erika, do you have anything to add?
Well, no, I don't want to repeat what I said earlier, but Laura May, we were talking, I'm going to do it anyway, but I'll make it really brief. We talked about, I mentioned to the party a few times the importance of having a candidate debrief, because it will just breed resentment. Like I said, those words. And so I finally wrote down my feedback on an email. It's, very constructive, nothing, too, well, it was pretty pointed. However, it was really constructive. And they said, yeah, we're going to give you a call on Friday. And then they never called me. So I just feel like there are some, as I said, there's some wins here, right? There are some things that we did very, very well in Nipissing. And then there's some things that were shocking, right? Some of it already. And so I just think we missed an opportunity to really get that expertise that everyone was talking about, that Erwin had mentioned. We just missed, I think the opportunity is now gone, sadly, unless maybe something good happens. I don't know, but that makes me sad, because there were so many good people, right, that had a lot of good momentum and a lot of good insight that I think we could learn from. Anyway, I don't have much more to add. That's pretty much it. And just to say too, one last thing is I guess, I do have to overcome I do have to overcome this fear, and I can see how the fear that everyone's talking about is playing out, right? You can see it playing out in online. You can see how it's disintegrating the party at its core. And it makes me, I don't know. I'm really tired. I walked 30 kilometers today as a postie. So I'm I'm at the point of when you're almost intoxicated from being tired.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm open to chatting with anyone in the future. I just think that these are really good conversations to have, and the more we have them, the better, and the more we stick together, the better. And just appreciate everyone's time. Sentimental.
Thank you, Erika. Laura May, do you have any last word? I'm going to say something and then you can have the last word before we go, okay? I like to give you the last word. You're always better than me. So the only thing I would think I noticed was I didn't know what this conversation would be about. I thought maybe it's going to be about policy and we need to be more left wing, like I was telling people back in the day. We need to talk about nationalization of the banks and nationalization more. And this conversation, maybe because it was me, Laura, Erika led it, but it was more about how things are done, not what is to be done. And that we're concerned. It speaks to me that there's a concern about there's a lot of pain and stuff in the party, and that's where people are thinking about. And so how do we deal with that to move forward? And there's a lot of, and we mirror, I guess, the communities we're trying to link with, because there's a lot of pain and crap in the communities we work with too. So I kind of feel like if we can't do it ourselves, right? If we can't respect and value and work with each other, how do we organize in communities in that way? So we have to do both at the same time, I think. That's hopeful to me because, like, yeah, we can have these discussions, and I feel like if people on different parts of the party were here, we could find a way to have them have a voice too in this and find some common ground here. Pollyanna. Okay, over to you, Laura May. Can you say a last word and then we'll go?
Yes, here's my last word. It's always about the how, no matter what. It's always about the how we build relationships, how we stay in relation with others,
Yes.
how we hear, it's always about the how. And when there's harm, any kind of harm that's done, you don't need people to say I'm sorry, and you don't need people to they need to act differently, right? And so if we're going to act in a different way, and if we're going to become the movement and reconnect ourselves to that movement, then that how is very specific, right? It's about how do we rebuild on the ground relationships. And what that also means is that some of that's going to be done, each of us, like the individuals on this call and the individuals that are part of this movement, doing what we need to do to rebuild those relationships and hold spaces in our respective communities, and then bring that back to each other in more of these conversations as we develop the next steps. I really and truly think that at the end of the day, the reason that Ford, for instance, resonates with whoever he resonates with, like you can be mad about who didn't vote and whatever, but at the end of the day, he got more seats, right? It didn't matter what he did, he got more seats. So we've got 4 more years of whatever fun times he has in store for us now. But part of what resonates is his ability to just talk to people. Like he literally just talks to people. And so he talks to them so well that even if he goes and he does something completely different than what he said he was going to do, what people remember is that he talked to them. So imagine what would happen if we in our positions just started actually talking to people, not just to ourselves and not just to the people that we've deemed to be the real New Democrats, but literally to the people in our communities, chatted with them, checked to see what was going on, and had regular meetings where we were coming together to have these discussions. Mm-hmm. Something that's different than knowing all of the Roberts rules and all of this stuff, because I'm sorry, but for somebody who's new to this space, none of that seems to have any kind of connection to what is actually needed on the ground right now. And sometimes when systems are so flawed and people are facing disastrous consequences that I'm not able to fix, even in my capacity as a sitting member, the thing that actually holds them in that moment is that I just sat down with them and my team listened. And so anything that we can do to rebuild that, to do that how piece first and foremost, I think is what's going to help us to reconnect to that broader movement.
Yep. Thank you. On that note, I agree with you 100%. Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura May, for always being brave. I know it takes its toll, but thank you. And thank you, Erika, since I've known you, for always being brave. Thank you. So, and thank you everyone for being here. You know my emails. You have comments, you want to pass them on. I don't know what I'll be next, but I'm certainly going to be vocal and following what happens, trying to add to the world's work and the world's struggles. Thank you, everyone. Good night.